What's up, guys? Placid5 here, and today I'm going to be doing a Stranger Things character tier list from the last 3 seasons. This is in honor of Stranger Things Season 4 coming out next Friday, so I'm pretty hyped about that, and I thought it would only be fitting if I ranked all the characters from best to worst, no particular order. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying, of course, this is my opinion. I'm going to be judging off characters' likability, like personal preference, of course, like what certain characters I like, right, that are likable to me, but also how they are as characters in the show, how they're written, how they're acted, and stuff like that. So I'm going to be taking those 3 things into account when I rank these. As you know, tier lists, how they work, I'm pretty much going to be dragging these pictures of the characters into one of these 5 rankings. So best of the best is the best, and then terrible is terrible. So yeah, and then everything in between. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so starting off with the first one, we have Barb. Barb was Nancy's friend in the first season. Now, also, I'm going to preface this by saying, spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about a lot of things that happen that are super spoiler heavy, so if you haven't seen Stranger Things at all, I would suggest checking that out, probably before you watch this video about Stranger Things. Yeah. So Barb is Nancy's friend in the first season. She is a really good friend. She's really nice. She seems really down to earth and really is always looking out for Nancy for the short time you see her. She unfortunately ends up dying. She gets killed. As a character, she plays a monumental role in that Nancy pretty much eternally feels guilty about her death, feels bad about it, and she also plays a role in actually kind of like why Nancy ends up finding like the Upside Down and everything like that to try to find Barb. So overall, ultimately a good character. I liked her from the little time that we did see of her. So because of that, I'm going to put her in the good tier. Next, we have Bob. Bob is the boyfriend of Joyce in the show. He's just this dad type, really nice. He plays such a monumental role in being sort of a stepfather figure to Jonathan and Will, even though he's not actually their dad. He's just really generous throughout the show. Just a guy that you really can't hate on him. I think Sean Astin does such a good job at playing him. You can't help to feel bad when they actually end up killing him. I'm not a huge fan of how he died. I thought it was kind of unnecessary. I don't like the last minute about to escape deaths that some of these shows and movies have. But ultimately, you really can't hate on the guy. He also plays a monumental role in helping Will kind of look at the Mind Flayer differently. He kind of has an analogy to his own, childhood and everything. So ultimately, just a stand-up guy throughout the show. I'm gonna put him at fantastic. I think he's really good. Next, we have Billy. Billy is a complete a-hole throughout the series. He's a bully. He's aggressive. He's not even like a jock type. He's just like a total douchebag throughout the show, almost running over kids, just bullying people, giving everybody around him a hard time. Always talking bad to his sister, and just like ultimately like this really aggressive kind of force in the show. As a character, he's very well written. I think they do an excellent job at kind of showing his background as to why he is the way he is. I thought they did a good job at developing that. He is a pivotal role in this 3rd season when he becomes kind of possessed, and then he ends up kind of redeeming himself at the end by sacrificing himself to save Max and everybody else. That to me was kind of bittersweet, because underneath this kind of like crazy kind of character, he wasn't all that bad. He didn't ask for a lot of things that happened to him. And I think that Dacre Montgomery, the actor, does a really good job in playing him. I can't really see anybody else like playing that role, so that was really good. And so because of that, I think I would put him under good. I think he is really unlikable. That's the only reason why I put him as good. But as a character, he's really good. So I think I'm going to put him right there. Next up, we have Dustin. Of course, Dustin is a fan favorite. the comic relief. He's hilarious. He's really smart throughout the show. He is just like a pivotal role of the main group. He's always thinking outside of the box, and just overall, I like the dynamic he has with Steve. He's just entertaining. I think Gaten, I think that's his name. He does such a good, the actor, he does such a good job at playing him, and he just is Dustin. So I'm just gonna put Dustin as fantastic. I mean, how could you not like Dustin? Next up, we have 11, probably the most pivotal character in the entire show. I think Millie Bobby Brown does an incredible job as 11. Just knocks it out of the park all 3 seasons. As a character, it's very tragic. It's the classic fish out of water effect throughout the show. She's kind of not familiar, and just the relationship that she ends up having with Mike and Hopper and Will and just pretty much all the characters. Everything kind of stems around her and her background. So ultimately, of course, it'd be a no-brainer. I think 11, even though she does kind of like have some annoying moments in season 3, kind of like very gossipy, kind of like rebellious phase that she has going on in season 2 and 3, kind of could be annoying. I've kind of found that annoying, but overall, I think that 11 is just a staple of the whole series. So that best of the best right here. Next up, we have Erica. Looks like she's being told something crazy, or she's saying a yo mama joke or something like that. Erica, she's a funny character. She's just kind of comic relief. I do like her. I did kind of find her annoying. She kind of just does insults the whole show. The 3rd season, though, she kind of came into her own a little bit more when she's stuck in that facility with Robin and Steve and all that. But ultimately, she's not super developed. She's just kind of there to be a comic relief. So I'm going to put Erica if I could put her in between these two, I would. I'm just going to put her a meh right now. I know. She is a favorite. She is funny, but ultimately, not as fleshed out. Next, we have Hopper, played by David Harbour. This is also an amazing character. I think that he's super likable throughout. From the minute you see him, he's kind of just always wanting to do the right thing. You can tell that he has a lot of experience, and even though he might be down in the dumps, as it were, throughout the show, and kind of like a lone ranger at times, people aren't always on his side. I think that there's a lot to respect about Hopper, and I think he's just an awesome character throughout. You can't help but respect him, and then they add a softer side to him later on when he kind of becomes the pseudo-father of 11. That's a really cool dynamic, makes for some funny moments and stuff. Now, at the very end, when he dies, right, like, has a really heroic death. Of course, as we know, I would never reveal this if I were them, but in the trailers and in the posters, everything for Stranger Things Season 4, they do reveal that Hopper is in fact still alive. I wouldn't have done that. They kind of allude to that in the post-credit scene of Season 3, but I wouldn't have just given that information up. I would have just had that be a surprise, even though it might be obvious to some, Obviously, they could have had that as a big reveal. So I wouldn't have done that, but Hopper is the best of the best. I think he's just such a solid character throughout the show. Next up, we have Jonathan. I always liked Jonathan. I think he was the sort of underdog character, right? He's more timid throughout the show, and I kind of like that he comes into his own later on. I like underdog stories. He's not the go-to. He's not the popular kid. He's always looked down upon by a lot of people, but ultimately he is really smart, and he cares a lot about his brother and everything. So in that sense, he is really likable, right? And I think that he really comes into his own, and his relationship with Nancy and everything kind of propels him as a character and as an underdog. You root for him throughout the show. He can be like a little whiny at times, but I think that ultimately just a really solid character. So I'm gonna put him at fantastic. I really like Jonathan. Next we have Joyce Byers. amazingly played by Winona Ryder. It was great to see her like still acting to her potential later on, right, with Stranger Things. I think she blows it out of the park. Granted, she kind of is like she plays it so well, but she's sort of this crazy. She comes across as really crazy in the first season, or really frantic. And I get it. Okay, her son's missing. Okay, obviously she has a reason to be like that, you know. But super protective, but like always kind of like scolding Will and Jonathan and stuff. But of course she's just being a mother and she really wants the best for her kids. But ultimately you really feel bad for her in season 1. Expertly acted. You really feel for her and what she's going through. And the whole Byers family has it pretty rough throughout. So because of that, I think Joyce is good. I think she's, in fact, I'm going to put her at fantastic. I think that she's a staple of the whole series, of course, and I love that she gets involved in trying to figure out, you know, where her son is, and just using the Christmas lights and everything. Like, she gets involved in trying to figure it out, and she doesn't give up, and she ends up doing it. So that to me is awesome. All right, so next you're probably wondering who the hell is that? Her name is, I had to search this up. Her name was actually Callie. Or Kaylee. She appears in 1.5 episodes of the show. She is 11's long-lost sister. To be honest, pretty unnecessary. That episode where 11 actually ends up going back and with this goth gang and stuff, it ends up like she was also a test subject. I don't know, but this character really isn't that interesting. Not really fleshed out. Nothing against the actress, just like really isn't really fleshed out at all. Terrible's a little rough. I would put more so bad, but just doesn't really add much to the show. Kind of feels forced and ultimately nothing to root for. In that same realm, we have Lonnie Byers. That's this guy's name. Also had to search that up. He appears for 1 episode. He's Byers' biological dad, if I'm not mistaken. Will and Jonathan's biological dad. Again, it's more so for exposition, given a little more character and background to the Byers family. Ultimately doesn't add much to the show. Can't really speak on him. In fact, I barely even remember the scene that he was in. Again, nothing against the actor, but not fleshed out, doesn't add much to the show. And really, if I do remember anything, I remember that he wasn't super likable. So I'm going to also put him as terrible/bad. Next, we have Lucas, another staple of the gang. I think Lucas is the calm and composed type. Okay, maybe not calm, but he is one of the smarter of the 4. He seems like a kind of a stand-up guy throughout the show. He seems a little more stable compared to some of the other characters, I feel. Now, of course, they all have the thing where they're all yelling at each other, and it's like it can be like kind of crazy, and he does have his moments like that. But I think Lucas is just a really solid character. I would put him at fantastic. I think Lucas is just ultimately solid. Next, we have Max. Mad Max over here. She gets introduced in season 2. Billy's sister, rather. Little sister. She plays a major role in the show. She's kind of like the tomboy type. Ends up dating Lucas, right, and everything. I liked Max, but she kind of was annoying throughout the show. She had moments where she was just like very unreasonable at times. Just like she had this attitude, like, you know, some people have like a certain attitude about them. Throughout the show, she kind of has this attitude with all the characters. Like, she seems to always be complaining about stuff. I think Sadie Sink did a great job at playing her, though. There's something cool about her, though. I do like Max overall. I'd say she's a good character, you know, like low good. You know what I mean? Like almost borderline meh. But I think she does play a pivotal role throughout the show, and I do think that there's a lot to say about her acting and everything like that. Next up, we have Mike. Mike, of course, is one of the main characters of the gang. Ends up going out with 11 in the show. He is, to be honest, not a huge fan of Mike. Throughout the show, I just find him to be... I know I'm using the word annoying a lot, but throughout the show, he just seems like Like, I wouldn't get along with Mike. I think Finn Wolfhard plays him well. I kind of get the vibe that Finn Wolfhard kind of is playing sort of the same characters in other movies or shows. I've seen him. I saw him in Ghostbusters, right? Saw him in It, stuff like that. He kind of is playing the same sort of role, kind of like the leader type, but like just like a frantic, kind of annoying character overall. But Mike does have his moments. I think as a character, he's well written though. He's pivotal to the series. While he's sort of like the leader type, I think that there's a lot to be said about his trajectory as a character and what he ends up doing for 11 and stuff like that. So I'm going to put him at good, even though his likability is not very high for me, but I think as a character, he's well played. Next up, we have Karen Wheeler. So Wheeler's mom. So she's a feisty one in the show. Yeah, her name's Karen. Apart from the most memorable scene, I mean, season 3, she's in the pool and everything. Yeah, like that scene with Billy. Overall, she isn't really like that developed. They don't really give her much to do in the show. She's kind of just the mom type, like the old-fashioned mom, right? She almost cheats on her husband in the show. So I don't remember if she does or not, but it's just like likability-wise is not like she's not the most loyal when it comes to that. Even though the dad is kind of like whatever. He's not on this tier list, but I would also put him in the meh or whatever. But I think that Karen over here, she's again, they don't really flesh her out. There's not much for her to do. She's very well played by the actress, but unfortunately, just not much to do in the show. I'm going to put her a meh. Next, we have Murray. Murray is the sort of comic relief, crazy conspiracy theorist guy, always yelling, thinks everything's a conspiracy. He's funny. He has some funny moments. But ultimately, he's kind of like an archetype. Like, he's that kind of crazy, like, lunatic kind of character, lives in a bunker, helps Nancy and Jonathan kind of figure out what's going on. And even though some of his conspiracies do have validity in the world that they're in, he just comes across as kind of like a crazy lunatic. But ultimately, he does have kind of funny moments throughout. So, with that being said, I mean, I'd put him at meh only because he's not super likable. He does have pivotal roles, and he is very well acted. But ultimately, he's just kind of a meh character. Next, we have Nancy Wheeler. I really like Nancy. I think that she is a really smart and capable character throughout the show. Something about her, she's just like really likable. She always seemed down to earth, and while she does have her moments, like, yeah, she's made mistakes. She wasn't the greatest friend, right? And quite frankly, like, she has bits where she's like, she does bad moves. Like, she really doesn't think straight all the time. Overall, as like looking at her as a whole in the show, I think she's really smart. She develops a lot throughout the show. I think she realizes some of the things that she does wrong throughout the show. And ultimately, I just think Nancy is a really solid character. I'm going to put her at fantastic. Next up, we have Robin. Robin is introduced in the 3rd season as the co-worker of Steve in Scoops Ahoy. Now, while I do think that Maya Hawke is a great actor in the show, I think Robin is she's kind of a scummy character throughout the show. She gives Steve a lot of crap. She really is sarcastic, which is kind of funny. But I ultimately, they don't flesh her out too much. I mean, she does have a really good moment with Steve. Like when they're in the bathroom and they like are tripping out or whatever. I mean, that's like a nice scene. It develops her a little more. But ultimately, I do think she's a good addition. She's just not super fleshed out because she was just introduced in the 3rd season. But I do think that she has a lot to contribute. I'm sure in the 4th season, if we get to see a little more of her, I might like her character a lot more. But ultimately, I do like the character. Something about her I do like. So I'm going to just put her at good. All right, rounding down with the final 4 here. We're going to talk about their teacher, the quirky teacher. I like this guy. He doesn't have much to do in the show. He's only there to kind of help them figure out the science behind everything that's going on. But I do like him. I think the teacher is really quirky. He's funny throughout the show, and he's just likable. He'd be that cool teacher that you would look forward to going to, making learning fun and stuff like that. So because of that, I mean, I'd put him somewhere in between meh and good, to be honest, because they don't give him much to do. But I will put him at good because he is likable. So next we have Alexi, another character that was introduced in season 3. He's a Russian scientist, I believe. It's kind of, he's a funny character in that he doesn't speak English that much, or he doesn't speak it that well. He has like a heavy Russian accent. It's kind of sad how he dies. They do make it heartfelt, and you do feel for it. I think that Hopper and Joyce they feel bad about it, of course, like what happens. But he doesn't contribute that much. The gag kind of gets overplayed a little bit later on when he's like, just doesn't really understand, like there's a lost in translation between the 3 characters. It's a gag that they kind of like overdo, if I remember correctly, in the 3rd season. There's not much for Alexi to do. He's just is the character he is. Not really somebody you remember throughout either. So I'm just going to put Alexi as meh, to be honest, personally. Next up we have Steve. I think Steve is a really good character. I really do like what they do with him. He starts off as your typical jock kind of character, bully throughout at the very beginning, but I like that they have a transformation for him in that he ends up kind of befriending the people that he was bullying before. He gets part of the gang, and he's really not as bad of a character as he seems, and you end up kind of rooting for him. I think that there's something to like about Steve. They took the jock archetype that they always use, and they kind of turned it on its head, and now he's just part of the gang, and now he's like has this really big friendship with Dustin, like they're always talking, and like that's kind of like funny to see because you don't usually see that. Usually the jock's a scumbag throughout the show. It's more of like a Billy type, like that's usually how they are, and while they do have redemptions, they don't usually change that much. But I think Steve just has a transformation, and I do like that. I think he has a lot to add to the show overall, and he's on good terms with a lot of characters, so I'm gonna put him as fantastic. I do like what they did with him. Okay, coming to this kid, I actually have no idea who the hell this is. I searched up all the other ones. That's how I know the Wheeler's moms call Karen and Lonnie and Callie, but this I didn't even bother. I don't know who this is. It looks like somebody from Ned's Declassified. I'm gonna put this as terrible because I just don't remember. I'm sorry if you're big fans of the character. If somebody could tell me who that is, I would really appreciate it. Finally, we have Will. I really do like Will. He's more of the timid type, but what he goes through is worse than any of the other characters in the show. He's secondary to 11. Like everything that's going on, he has something to do with it. Will just has it rough throughout the whole series, pretty much. Like, even when nothing's going on, he's still, like, he wants one thing, and his friends are just moving on. They're growing, like, without him. You just really feel for Will. I think Noah Schnapp, who plays Will, does such an amazing job throughout the whole series. You really do feel for him. Yeah, you can't really feel but to relate to him. So I think Will is an amazing character. He's the best of the best when it comes to this. So there you have it. There's my tier list. Let me know what you agree and what you don't agree with. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Look forward to watching Stranger Things Season 4 coming out next Friday. I do want to do a review on that. But make sure to subscribe and follow us on our social media platforms. We try to upload and post pictures and everything as much as we can. Thank you so much for the support. Have an awesome day.